Chapter 13. Ruined. The story is told by Joseph. I kept reminding myself how long it had been. 2 weeks since Mary left, I would say, as I woke up in the morning. 3 weeks, as I went to work in my father's old workshop. 1 month. I made a new door for the house of a farmer whose cow had rammed a horn through the old one. 1.5 months. I fixed a loom for one of Mary's aunts, a weaver who sold her cloth in a nearby town. 2 months. I began to work on a new table to go into the village synagogue. By the time it was 3 months, I also made a lot of progress on the new room which Mary and I would live in when we were married. Its walls stood proudly upright. The stones fit snugly and were well plastered together. It was just waiting for a proper roof. I admit, I was delaying. I knew I could do it. I'd built ceilings before perfectly well, but after the incident in Sepphoris, let's just say I was nervous. You ought to get it done before the rains come, my mother kept going on at me. Though Josiah was still gone, she was better now. As long as nothing jogged her thoughts towards him, she seemed back to normal. Now, obviously I was glad, but I admit I did sometimes miss the days when she hadn't nagged so much. I was concentrating on carving a particularly fiddle bit of decorations on the table leg one day when she came in. Perfectly silent at first, so I didn't notice. Then suddenly she made her presence felt. Have you heard the news? I jumped. My knife slipped and made a deep gouge in the wood. Ma! I examined the table leg carefully. No, there was no way I could disguise the cut. The design was ruined. I'd have to start again, sighing. I put the knife down and turned to greet my mother properly. She had no idea what she made me do. There's to be a census, she told me excitedly. In 6 months' time, we are all going to have to travel to Bethlehem. So those old women were right, I thought. 6 months. Mary and I should be preparing to marry by then. The date hadn't yet been fixed, but we had said it would be a year after the promises were made. But if there was a census, then we might end up staying in Bethlehem for a month or even more, which might mean delaying the wedding. Mother seemed to read my mind. I was thinking, she said. We'll see what your ba thinks, of course, and Mary's family, but maybe we could bring the wedding forward. Celebrate it before we go. It'd be a good thing for Mary to see Bethlehem. Yes, I answered thoughtfully, my mind immediately going to Judea and its unfamiliar hills. Perhaps Mary had visited Bethlehem already. How far away from the city did Elizabeth and Zechariah live? I had no idea. The city of David, you know, my mother was saying, bringing me back out of my thoughts. City of your ancestors. It would be good for her to really appreciate what family she's joining. I smiled. To my parents, family pride was the most important thing in the world. But I did think bringing the wedding forward was a good idea. We could marry in the winter once the rains were over, then take the trip south together. It would be our first joint adventure. But nothing could be agreed until Mary was back. The olive harvest was well over by now, and we were coming to a time of festivals. We all thought Mary and the other travelers would return by the day of the trumpets, only days away. I was so looking forward to seeing her. I expected her every day. But when she finally came, all my hopes were torn in tatters. I didn't realize the truth at first. She came into the workshop the morning after she arrived, still tired from the long journey, but cheerful and full of things to tell me. "I've seen Josiah," she chatted. "He's safe with my great aunt and uncle. They're hiding him from the soldiers." "And the soldiers?" "Yes, I'm sorry. They were chasing him and said that he had killed somebody, but it wasn't true. And Joseph, we went to Hebron, where Abraham and Sarah are buried, and it was the most amazing thing. And Elizabeth was so wonderful to me, and when I arrived, Mary trailed off. One hand went to her stomach, and her face turned a little gray. I rushed to bring her a stool. "Are you sick? What's the matter?" She shook her head. Just then my mother poked her head in. "You're back!" she cried, and Mary rose again to accept her embrace. "You've put on weight," said my mother approvingly. "Now when did you arrive? What news of your great aunt?" But Mary was looking even grayer now. She pressed her hand to her stomach again. "I'm sorry. I think I'm going to be—" She lurched out of the room. We heard her spew her breakfast, and possibly also the previous night's dinner, onto the ground. I expected Ma to go and help her, but instead she looked at me sharply. "Sick," she said, "and fatter than when she went away. Joseph, how many months is it that she has been gone?" 3.5, I answered, mystified. She got up to follow Mary. I heard them speak to each other too quietly for me to make out the words. Then I couldn't believe it. Was that a smack I heard? I rushed out. Yes, my mother had slapped Mary in the face. Mary was sobbing on the ground, my mother standing over her with a grim expression. Her hand was still raised. "Ma!" I pushed past her to help Mary up. But Mary said nothing. She just hid her face from me and then stumbled away. "Ma," I said again. "What?" "She's pregnant," said my mother grimly. 3 or 4 months gone, I'd say. 3, I gaped at her. "Are you the father, Joseph?" I gaped again. My mother snorted in disgust and stalked off home. My life was ruined. It was like my mother had taken a knife to all my hopes and dreams and gouged a huge, deep line right through the middle. I sat flat on the floor in disbelief. Mary was going to have a child, and it was nothing to do with me. That meant that she had lied to me. She didn't love me as much as she said she did. I had never felt so much pain. Mary, how could she do this? How could she break my trust like this? How long had she been lying to me? Had all that time I spent with her, all that time I spent just thinking of her, had it all been a waste? A tiny part of me, just a tiny part, did cry out that surely there must be some misunderstanding. This was Mary, whom I'd known all my life. Mary, who was good and true and loyal and kind. Mary couldn't be so faithless. There had to be some explanation. Yet the facts seemed plain. Mary was pregnant. I wasn't the father of her baby. Therefore, Mary was unfaithful, which meant I couldn't marry her.